How do you like to have sex? It's an interesting, reasonable, valid question. As human beings, we cover a lot of bases when it comes to our sexual behavior. From gay, bi, straight, all the way from relatively vanilla to gloriously deviant. And any glance at a magazine rack can tell you that nothing, as if we needed reminding, nothing is important, nothing is more important than the sordid details of other people's sex lives. But I'll tell you one thing, in terms of sexual weirdness, humans, we got nothing on insects. How often do you like to have sex? Once a month? Fortnightly? Weekly? Daily? More? Well, how about 50 times an hour? like these bush crickets. Well, we'll come back to them later. For how long do you like to have sex? Maybe 10 minutes? Half an hour, 3 hours? How about 79 days, like these stick insects? Nobody knows precisely how much of that is spent actually copulating, but the male grasps onto the female with his genital claspers for nearly 3 months without letting go. Bedbugs have a hypodermic syringe for a penis. They stab the female with it somewhere random on her body and then have sex with the wound. And their sperm swim through the female's blood to her ovaries, completely bypassing her reproductive tract. This male spider snaps off his penis inside the female, leaving her plugged up like a corked bottle. This male spider spontaneously dies in the act of sex, leaving his corpse as an obstacle to future males. Some of you are probably thinking by now, "Oh, why would you even do that?" Well, I would say that's a great start. Because as biologists, we take that question, why, a little bit further and actually go and find out. So I'd like to take you today on a bit of a journey in the medium of crazy-ass insect sex to discover how taking an evolutionary view of all of this kind of glorious variation can help us understand what is essentially one of the most important behaviors in nature. And because we are animals, we evolved, can ultimately help us understand ourselves. And secondly, to help unravel a biological mystery in some of the insects that I help to study. So let's go right back to the beginning, to one of the most fundamental observations in behavioral biology and one of Darwin's basic statements. Isn't it interesting how it tends to be the guys and not the girls that brag about their sexual prowess, right? We all know that animals do this too. Here is a little male peacock spider, no bigger than a baby's fingernail, displaying to a female in just the same way as the bird after which he's named. And the females choose males based on how well they can dance and how sexy they look. And males also fight over females. This is Phytalmia, an antlered fruit fly. You can see he's got some quite impressive antlers, and they use these, just like red deer, to rut, rather comically, it has to be said. So, why do males and not females tend to do this? Well, traditional logic has it that this is a numbers game. It's basic supply and demand. If you are an animal and you want babies, you've got 2 jobs. Find a mate and provide for your offspring. But you can't do both of these at once. It's extremely difficult. Imagine running around on the pull with a load of heavy shopping. Well, it therefore pays some members of a species, even at the gamete level, to focus on one of those activities. Males are the members of a species that focus at the gamete level on finding a female. They have thousands upon millions of tiny, mobile sperm. And females are the members of a species that, at the gamete level, focus on providing for their offspring. And they have a very small number of extremely expensive gametes. So, all else being equal, males can basically always have more babies by having more sex. Whereas the same is not true of females. Sexually available females are typically a limiting factor in the environment. That means that males will compete over them, and females can typically choose between an array of between an array of males that all want to mate. Right? Well, that's simple. Well, almost. It turns out that that's true if there is no other factor that's limiting your baby making rate. And whether you're male or female, it turns out that plenty of things can slow you down in the baby department. For instance, lots of insects, in lots of animals in fact, males put a lot of effort into mating. In these dance flies, the males get prey gifts for the females, and you can see here that she's chowing down on a hapless fly while he's getting it on. And this can, believe it or not, because getting flies is expensive, make males the limiting factor in the environment. In this dance fly, called Ramphomia, females get all their nutrition from these gifts, every bit of it. And so they compete very fiercely over the males. And the males can choose which females to give their gift to. They choose the females that are biggest and which look like they've got the most eggs. And the females, this is a female you can see here, have hairs on their legs that make them look bigger than they actually are. They have evolved to lie about their size. So they also have something absolutely extraordinary. They've got like an inflatable flap on their abdomen, and they blow themselves up like balloons. And they fly around, blown up like a balloon, showing off to the males how big they are. They fly around in groups so they can compare each other better. A similar thing happens in some, but not all, of the insects that I help to study. They have a behavior which is a biological mystery, and this is the thing that I want to help unravel with you today. So they're called bush crickets, or katydids, which is the same thing, and you're about to watch them mate. And here we go. First thing to notice is that female has mounted the male. That's about the least weird thing about it. The second thing to notice, and I'll pause it there, is that the male has two little tentacles at the end of his abdomen. These are called cerci. They happen on a lot of insects. If any of you has had particular inclination to look closely at a cockroach, you'll see that they also have cerci at the end of their abdomen. Cockroaches use theirs for sensory functions. Bush crickets use theirs for sex, which is really exciting. And you can see the male here is just using them to gently stabilize himself against the female. And the cerci are engaging with little pits on the female relatively peacefully. We'll return to them in a minute. So the next thing I want to show you about what the male does is something really important that happens across all crickets. And it's what the male is about to do here. He is about to give the female all of his sperm at once in a little bag. And that's what all crickets do this. It's a really, really important behavior because it allows us a little window into one of the most important battles in evolution. There you go. There you can see the sperm bag. It's called a spermatophore. Yeah, one of the most important battles in evolution, which is the battle for what happens to sperm after mating. And we're going to come back to that in some detail in a little bit. But the thing that's really interesting about bush crickets is what happens next. The male is about to... Yes, right. The male gives the female a gigantic gelatinous packet of jelly. It can be up to 40% of his body weight. It's made of protein and water and carbs. And then he drops off. You're about to see. There he goes. And then what the female does is she bends over and begins to eat it. And she eats all the way through it and finishes up by finishing off that sperm packet. So, what is this blob of jelly for? Well, it might be possibly the most debated blob of jelly in science. Some females use this for nutrition. If you experimentally feed females this, they will make more babies in some species. The spermatophore can contain enough energy to power a female for 2 whole days. So theoretically, she should be able to just have sex every couple of days and never have to forage. And correspondingly, in some females, in some species, the females compete over the males and have battles over the males, which is really, really interesting. But in some other species, this nuptial gift is nutritionally useless. It's more like a piece of flavoured chewing gum. It's made of the most cheap protein available, and it's laced with things called phagostimulants, which entice the female to eat it. And what is more, it's drugged, because it contains substances that make the female feel less horny after eating it. At the same time, in other species, this gift, or what looks like a gift, takes exactly as long and no longer for the female to eat it as it does for all of the male sperm to drain into her. So the male is giving her the minimum possible amount of jelly so that he can use the rest on other females. Not very paternal, not very generous. And you can see this kind of stingy gift in lots of other insects. And these dance flies, this hanging fly called Biticus, males get gifts of prey for females, just like in the dance flies. But the male will often steal the gift back once he's done having sex and go and use it on another female. And back to the dance flies, in one lineage of dance flies, the males have evolved to wrap the gift in silk, like a little Christmas present, which is lovely, and the female kind of unwraps it. But in one of those lineages, the males have evolved to just give the silk. So he gives them a hollow balloon with silk, and by the time the female has discovered that it's empty, the male has done mating. So, stingy gift. So in fact, what this may be, the spermatophore may be, is a device for the female to protect her sperm. It's a device for the male to protect his sperm and stop the female getting around to eating it. And this brings us round to one of the most important battles in evolution, the battle for what happens to sperm after mating, because mating is really just the beginning. Mating is just the process of the male giving his sperm to the female. There's a lot that can happen between mating and fertilization. For starters, the male really wants only his sperm to be the ones that are inside the female. He wants no other males to get in. That is why those male Nephila spiders snap off their penis inside the female's reproductive tract and stop other males getting in. It's also why the male Argiope dies while having sex, to leave his corpse as an obstacle to future males. But it's also to the female's benefit to make it really difficult for the male to fertilize even after mating. That way, she can screen out males that are of the best quality. She can make sure that he's of the best quality by screening out inferior males. And she can also, even at this late stage, choose between the sperm of rival males within her reproductive tract. That is why the male bedbug stabs the female somewhere randomly on her body and has his sperm swim to her ovaries through her blood. He is bypassing all of the female's adaptations to control her fertilization, to control access to her ovaries. In this Drosophila, these fruit flies, the females have a spermicidal reproductive tract. It makes it really difficult for sperm to get to the ovaries. And males have an amazing counter-adaptation. They have a class of non-functional sperm, whose job is they act like basically what we would describe as a human shield. They surround the functional sperm, protect them from the dangerous chemicals, and ferry them to the ovaries. Quite amazing. And if you'll allow me a brief digression away from the arthropods here, this mollusk here has something even more remarkable. Kamikaze sperm, a soldier class of sperm whose job is to hunt down and destroy the sperm of rival males within the female they've both mated with. Incredible. And if you thought these kind of gamete wars, this kind of gamete spite, was limited to males, think again. This little parasitoid wasp called Copidosoma lays an egg inside a host insect, and her offspring eat it from the inside. That's basically the mode of life for all parasitoid wasps. But if, naturally, she wants this host all for herself. So if there are any other embryos from other females inside that host, they'd better watch out, because this female's eggs clone themselves and divide into a clone army that contain soldier embryos whose job is to swim around and annihilate any other embryos from other females inside the host. Quite amazing. But these gamete wars, fascinating though they are, happen at a microscopic scale and inside another insect, which makes them extremely hard to follow. But crickets, they dump their sperm in a bag. And we can see that, and we can see what the female does with it. If she doesn't like the male, she can just remove the bag. And there's abundant evidence that females pay a lot of attention to how long they leave that bag in. The bigger the male they've mated with, the longer they leave the bag in. So if you're a male, big or small, and good or bad quality, obviously you want the female to use your sperm rather than eating it or getting rid of it. And so males have a range of adaptations to try and stop that female from removing the bag. Black crickets physically harass the females. Any females that remove the bag too early get a lot of physical harassment. Ornebius, whom we met earlier in the talk, can replace the spermatophore as quickly as the female can eat it, up to 50 times an hour, which is almost too exhausting to think about. And these sperm packets drain into the female very, very quickly because they're packed with a very small number of sperm, only a few hundred per packet. Incidentally, this strategy of rapid-fire mating has led to another world record for bush crickets. This is Platyclaeus, the tuberous bush cricket. This is a species with super promiscuous females who mate with an average of about 23 males. And that translates into a huge number of mating opportunities for males. And such rapid-fire mating requires a special kind of testicle. In fact, it requires the biggest testicles known to science, at 14% of the male's body weight, which, translated onto a human being of 80 kilograms, would be 11 kilogram testicles, or equivalent to 2 human heads dangling between your legs. So, in fact, the spermatophore, the nuptial gift, the spermatophylax, in fact, may be a third kind of male strategy for protecting his sperm, for delaying the female from eating his sperm packet. Yes, the solution is to distract the female with something to eat while your sperm drains into her. And we can see this strategy in lots of other crickets in different kind of forms. So in striped ground crickets, for example, the female begins eating the male's legs during sex. And in these sagebrush crickets, she begins sucking his blood while they're having sex, which is quite grim. So me and my colleagues decided to try and test this. And we took an evolutionary view across the evolutionary tree of bush crickets. And we focused on a scattering of species where that nuptial gift had been lost. Now, if, as we propose, the function of that nuptial gift is not nutritional, but in fact to delay the female from eating the sperm packet, we would expect to see that every time that where the gift has been lost, it would be replaced by an alternative method of protecting the ejaculate. Well, what we saw was quite surprising. In fact, every time that nuptial gift has been lost in the course of evolution, it's been replaced by a fourth male strategy for protecting his ejaculate. And that strategy could quite feasibly be called, for want of a better word, insect bondage. So remember those little tentacles that we saw on the male bush cricket earlier? They were the ones that were peacefully engaging with little pits in equivalent places on the female. Well, not in the bush crickets that don't give nuptial gifts, they don't. In these species, those cerci have evolved and been modified and adapted and expanded into these horrifying-looking devices that would look more at home in a torture chamber. The males use these to grab onto the female and hold her down and hold her there for a very long time after they've finished transferring their sperm packet. These Mexican true crickets, you can see the cerci look a bit like a bear trap that has closed round the female. In these Myconema, you can see that the male has genital tongs that wrap all the way around the female and prevent her getting away. Every time this nuptial gift has been lost, you can see that the cerci have been modified in this way. The ones on the left you can see are from crickets with normal sex and a nuptial gift. And the ones on the right are their relatives with no nuptial gift and prolonged sex. Top right, you can see they have spiked cerci that grab onto the female and pierce her cuticle. The bottom right, you can see they interlock around the female for all the world like a pair of insect handcuffs. So every time the gift has been lost, it's been replaced by what is clearly a strategy of pretty violent sexual conflict. The females are not down with this. They jump and jiggle and bite and kick and try to get away. And taking this bird's eye view, this evolutionary view, has then helped us understand the original function of that nuptial gift. It's much more likely that that original gift functioned in the same way to delay the female from getting round to eating that sperm packet. Sexual behaviour is one of the most intimate and important behaviours in nature. And if, like me, you're interested in the evolution of sex, insects are like an insane Aladdin's cave. It's and taking, like, faced with all this crazy, magnificently, wonderfully crazy behaviour, taking the evolutionary view can help us understand the patterns behind all of that madness. So the next time you hear a cricket chirping in the bush, have a quick think about what might be in store for him and his partner. And then, maybe with a new perspective, have a think about how you would next like to have sex. Thank you.